If you could discover the truth to any mystery, what would it be? Story 1. The nature or physics of dark matter. Because the universe doesn't work without it. Galaxies spin too fast. Clusters should fly apart. The math collapses unless there's far more mass than we can see. And not a little more. Most of it. Roughly 85% of all matter is invisible. That's not a missing detail. That's the majority of reality. Dark matter doesn't emit light, block it, or interact with us in any normal way. We only know it's there because gravity keeps giving it away. Stars move wrong. Light bends around nothing. The universe leaves fingerprints of something we can't touch. And every explanation is uncomfortable. If it's particles, our best physical theory is incomplete in a fundamental way. If it's gravity, one of our most trusted forces doesn't actually work as advertised. If it's neither, then we don't even know what questions to ask yet. What really messes with me is that dark matter is passing through you right now, constantly. You'll never feel it. No signal, no interaction, just mass moving through you like you're not there. The universe is built on something invisible and indifferent. If you could know the truth to one mystery, this one would redraw reality and remind us that everything we see is the exception, not the rule. Story 2. Everything that's hiding in the ocean, because we like to pretend the ocean is explored. It isn't. Not even close. We've mapped the surface of Mars better than our own seafloor. Most of the ocean exists in permanent darkness, under pressures that would crush submarines like soda cans. And whatever lives down there doesn't care about us. The deeper you go, the stranger it gets. Creatures with no eyes, creatures with too many, bodies built for pressure, not beauty. Things that don't hunt with sight or sound, but vibration and chemistry. Entire ecosystems that run without sunlight, feeding on heat and minerals like the surface world doesn't even exist. That's what bothers me. These aren't ancient relics or evolutionary dead ends. They're thriving, right now, in numbers we can't count, shapes we barely understand, doing things biology textbooks don't prepare you for. And we only see fragments, a blurry camera feed, a dead specimen dragged up and distorted by decompression, a sonar outline that doesn't resolve into anything familiar. There's no guarantee the biggest things have been seen. The ocean doesn't reveal. It hides. It erases evidence. It applies pressure until secrets stay secrets. If you could know the truth to any mystery, knowing exactly what lives down there would change how we see this planet. Because it would mean we're not living in a mostly known world, we're living on the surface of something vast, dark, and largely indifferent to it. Story 3. Are we alone? Not in a hopeful way, in a factual one. Because the universe is big enough that this question shouldn't exist. Hundreds of billions of galaxies, trillions of planets, chemistry that repeats everywhere. On paper, life should be common. Intelligent life shouldn't be shocking. And yet, silence. No signals we can confirm. No probes. No artifacts. No undeniable evidence that anyone else ever made it far enough to matter. Just static, distance, and a universe that doesn't answer back. That's what makes this question uncomfortable. Either life is rare beyond comprehension, or something keeps wiping it out before it spreads. Maybe intelligence burns itself out. Maybe the universe is hostile to anything that tries to leave its cradle. Or maybe civilizations are everywhere, and deliberately quiet. Every explanation is bad in a different way. If we're alone, then all meaning, memory, and consciousness exist in a tiny bubble that can be erased by one bad century. If we're not, then someone else already solved problems we're still struggling with, and chose not to say hello. The scariest part isn't aliens. It's the possibility that the universe is either empty or watching. And in both cases, the silence is doing all the talking. Story 4. Where is MH370? Because planes don't just disappear. Not in the modern world. Not with satellites, radar, transponders, black boxes, and entire governments watching the sky. And yet this one did. A commercial airliner. Hundreds of people. Gone. We know fragments. The plane turned. Systems went dark in sequence. It flew for hours after it should have been tracked. Debris washed up years later, thousands of miles apart, like punctuation marks instead of an answer. Enough to prove it crashed, but not enough to explain how or why. That's what makes it disturbing. This wasn't ancient history or bad record keeping. This happened in an era where we assume everything is logged, backed up, and recoverable, and the system failed anyway. Every theory is unsettling. Mechanical failure doesn't explain the silence. Hijacking doesn't explain the lack of claims. Pilot intent raises questions nobody wants to answer cleanly. And accidents don't usually erase themselves this thoroughly. What really matters isn't curiosity, it's the families. No bodies. No certainty. Just a permanent pause where closure should be. If you could know the truth to any mystery, this one wouldn't rewrite physics or cosmology. It would just prove whether a world full of technology can still lose something enormous and never fully admit how. Story 5. The Riemann hypothesis. Not because it sounds impressive, but because it sits at the center of mathematics like a locked door no one can force open. At its core, it's about prime numbers, the most basic building blocks of math. They look random, scattered, unpredictable. And yet, everything suggests there's a hidden order underneath. The Riemann hypothesis claims that order exists, and that we've been circling it for over 160 years without touching it. What makes it unsettling is how much depends on it. If it's true, huge parts of mathematics quietly make sense. Proofs become cleaner, patterns snap into focus. If it's false, entire structures we trust would need to be re-examined. Not broken, but questioned. Thousands of the smartest people who ever lived have tried to prove it. Many thought they were close. None succeeded. Not because it's obviously impossible, but because it's subtle in a way that resists brute force. Every attempt feels like grabbing smoke. And unlike physical mysteries, there's no experiment to run, no telescope to build, no data to collect, just logic, symbols, and a truth that either exists or doesn't, completely independent of us. That's the uncomfortable part. The answer is already there. It's fixed. Eternal, waiting. We just might not be smart enough to ever reach it. Story 6, Area 51. Not because of aliens, at least not at first, but because of the secret. This isn't a rumor site or a misunderstood base. It's a place the government spent decades pretending didn't exist, guarding with lethal force, fake planes, restricted airspace, and layers of misdirection. That alone tells you something mattered. We know pieces, experimental aircraft, stealth technology, projects so advanced they looked impossible when tested. Things people reported as UFOs that later turned out to be human-made, just decades ahead of what the public was allowed to know. But that explanation only goes so far, because secrecy has inertia. You don't maintain it at this level unless there's still something worth hiding, and not just from enemies, but from everyone. Is it just next-generation weapons? Surveillance tech? Material science? Or did something arrive there that wasn't built by us, and the safest move was to lock it behind silence until we figured it out? The unsettling part isn't aliens, it's the realization that there may already be answers about technology, power, or our place in the universe that a very small group of people decided the rest of us weren't ready to hear. Area 51 isn't scary because of what might be there. It's scary because of how much effort went into making sure we don't know. Story 7, The Cure to Depression. Not a treatment, not it gets better if you do the work. An actual cure. Because depression isn't just sadness. It's not a bad week or a rough mindset. It's a system failure. Motivation disappears, joy stops registering. The future feels closed, not unknown. And the worst part is how invisible it is, how functional it can look from the outside while everything inside is shutting down. We throw everything at it. Medication, therapy, exercise, diet, mindfulness, purpose. Some people improve, some don't. Some do everything right and still lose years of their lives to something they never chose. That's what makes this mystery brutal. If depression were purely chemical, we'd have solved it. If it were purely psychological, insight would be enough. If it were purely environmental, changing circumstances would. But it slips through every clean explanation. And the cost is enormous. Not just deaths, but the quiet erosion of people who are still here, still breathing, still showing up, while feeling nothing. If there were a real cure, it wouldn't just save lives. It would give them back. And it would answer one of the hardest questions we avoid asking out loud. Why does the human mind sometimes turn so completely against itself and refuse to stop? Story 8. Was it the chicken or the egg? Not as a joke, as a question about origins. Because this isn't really about chicken. It's about where things begin. At what point does a gradual process become a new thing? Evolution doesn't make clean cuts. There's no moment where nature stops and announces, this is the first one. If the egg came first, then remind yourself, what laid it? Something that was almost a chicken, but not quite. Close enough that the difference only exists in hindsight. A label we apply after the fact. And if the chicken came first, then it had to hatch from something, which means the answer loops until the question collapses. That's what makes it interesting. There is no satisfying starting point. Just transitions we pretend are boundaries, because the alternative is admitting that origins are messy and continuous. We like clean answers, first causes, clear beginnings, but reality doesn't work that way. It drifts, it mutates, it slides from one state into another without asking permission. So the question isn't which came first, it's whether first even exists at all. And once you realize that, a lot of other questions start to feel less stable too. Story 9, The Cure for Cancer. Not a better treatment, not another drug that buys time. An actual cure, something final. Because cancer isn't one enemy, it's a betrayal. Your own cells deciding the rules no longer apply, no virus to eradicate, no foreign body to remove, just normal biology pushed slightly off course and then allowed to run forever. That's why it's so hard to stop. Every cancer is different. Every body is different. End it too gently and it adapts. End it too aggressively and you end the patient. Even when we win, it often feels temporary, conditional, fragile. We've made real progress. Survival rates are up. Some cancers are manageable, but the word cure still feels out of reach, like something biology itself is resisting. And the cost of that gap is everywhere. Hospital rooms, waiting rooms, families learning new vocabularies they never wanted to know, lives divided into before and after a diagnosis. If there were a true cure, it wouldn't just change medicine. It would change how we think about aging, death, and how much control we actually have over our own bodies. And it would answer a brutal question we've been circling for decades. Can intelligence ever fully outsmart its own biology? Story 10. What is light? Not in the textbook sense, not waves or particles, but what it actually is at a fundamental level. Because light refuses to behave, measure it one way and it's a wave, spreading out, interfering with itself. Measure it another way and it's a particle, arriving in discrete packets like tiny bullets of energy. It changes behavior depending on how you look at it, which is already unsettling. Even strangers, light doesn't experience time. From its own perspective, emission and absorption happen instantly. No past, no future. Just arrived. That alone breaks intuition in a way most people never sit with. Light is also the speed limit of reality. Nothing with mass can outrun it. Space and time bend around it. Causality depends on it. And yet we still talk about it like it's just illumination, like it exists to help us see. It doesn't. We see because of light, not the other way around. Without it, the universe would still be doing everything it does, forming stars, collapsing matter, warping space-time, completely indifferent to observation. If you could know the truth to any mystery, understanding light wouldn't just clarify physics, it would clarify reality itself. Because whatever light truly is, the universe seems built to obey it. Story 11. Who's the creator? Not which religion got it right, not which story sounds nicest, but whether there is a creator at all. And if so, what that actually means. Because everything exists and that's already strange. Matter, laws, constants tuned just well enough for structure, chemistry, life. Something sets the rules or the rules somehow set themselves. Either option is unsettling. If there is a creator, then it chooses distance. No clear instructions, no unambiguous proof, just silence and interpretation. Which raises uncomfortable questions about intent. Was this deliberate design a hands-off experiment, or something that doesn't think in ways we recognize at all? And if there isn't one, that's no easier. Then everything, consciousness, morality, love, suffering, emerged from blind processes with no goal and no audience. Meaning isn't discovered, it's improvised. What bothers me most is that both possibilities feel incomplete. A creator explains existence, but raises questions about responsibility and absence. No creator explains mechanics but leaves purpose hanging in midair. Either way, we're stuck inside the system, trying to infer its origin from the inside, like characters in a book arguing about the author. If you could know the truth to any mystery, this one wouldn't just answer a question. It would redefine what it even means to exist. Story 12. The Lost City of Atlantis. Not because of crystals or super technology, but because it sits in that uncomfortable space between myth and history. Plato didn't present it as a fairy tale. He described it like a warning. A powerful civilization, advanced for its time, wiped out suddenly and completely. That's what sticks. If Atlantis was real, then it means complex societies can vanish so thoroughly that they leave almost nothing behind. No ruins we can confidently point to, no clear lineage, just stories that survive longer than stone. And the timing matters. Plato placed it thousands of years before his era, around the end of the last ice age, a period marked by massive floods, rising seas, and climate chaos. The kind of events that erase coastlines and drown cities without asking permission. If Atlantis wasn't real, then why did the story persist? Why does it feel less like fantasy and more like a memory distorted by time? What makes it unsettling is the implication either way. If it existed, then human history is missing entire chapters. If it didn't, then we invented a story that perfectly captures our fear of collapse long before modern civilization existed. Atlantis isn't really about a lost city. It's about the possibility that progress isn't permanent, and that the past may be far more fragile and far more advanced than we're comfortable admitting. Story 13. The Secret of Monkey Island. Because it's not really a joke question, it's a deliberately unanswered one. The game promises a secret, builds toward it, circles it, teases it, and then refuses to land. Every time it gets close, it swerves. The tone shifts. The fourth wall cracks. You're reminded that you're playing a game, but not in a way that feels lazy. In a way that feels intentional. That's what makes it stick. Is the secret that none of it is real? That Guybrush is a kid playing pretend? That the story exists only because you expect it to have meaning? Or that the act of searching is the point, and the moment you get a clean answer, the magic dies? Monkey Island understands something most stories don't. Mystery is fragile. Explain it too clearly and it collapses. Leave it open and it lives forever. The secret was never hidden in a lore document or a final cutscene. It was hidden in how the game messes with you. Your expectations, your need for closure, your assumption that every question deserves an answer. If you ever fully explain the secret of Monkey Island, you don't solve it. You destroy it. And maybe that's the secret it was protecting the whole time. Story 14, where is the Ark of the Covenant? Because if it ever existed as described, it wasn't just a symbol. It was power, the center of Israelite worship, a physical object said to carry divine presence, capable of ending those who touched it wrong and flattening armies without effort. And then it vanishes. The last solid references place it in the Temple of Solomon. After that, nothing. No confirmed record of destruction. No recovery. Just silence, right where history usually gets loud. Some say it was hidden before Jerusalem fell, buried, smuggled out. Others claim it rests in Ethiopia, guarded to this day inside the Church of Our Lady of Zion. Seen by no one, verified by no one. A claim that survives entirely on faith and tradition. And that's the problem. The Ark sits at the intersection of religion, history, and myth. If it's real and still exists, it's one of the most important artifacts ever made. If it's gone, then one of the most powerful symbols in human history disappeared without explanation. Either way, something massive slipped through the cracks, and the world just kept going, pretending that was normal. Story 15. What happened at Dyatlov Pass? Because 9 experienced hikers didn't just die, they unraveled. In 1959, they camped on a frozen slope near Dyatlov Pass, and then sometime in the night cut their way out of their tent from the inside. No struggle, no clear threat, just an immediate decision to flee into sub-zero darkness. Half-dressed, barefoot, leaving behind food, boots, and shelter. That alone makes no sense. Some bodies were found calmly lying down, as if they chose to stop. Others had catastrophic injuries, crushed ribs, fractured skulls, without external wounds. One was missing a tongue, another had eyes gone. Traces of radiation showed up on clothing. The timeline doesn't line up cleanly. The behavior doesn't match panic or logic. Avalanche theory explains parts, but not the cuts, the spacing, or the injuries. Military tests? Maybe, but no proof. Infrasound? Fear-induced psychosis. Also possible. None of it fully fits. What's disturbing isn't that we don't know. It's that whatever happened convinced 9 rational people that freezing to death was safer than staying put. Something broke their understanding of the situation so completely that survival instincts failed. And whatever it was, it left no clear fingerprints. Just silence in the snow, and a mystery that still refuses to behave. Because the explanations we give feel incomplete. We're told it was ramps, copper tools, and manpower, and yes, those explain something. But not everything. Not the precision, not the scale, not the logistics lining up cleanly enough to feel settled. Some of the stone blocks weighed tens of tons and were moved miles. The joints are so tight you can't slide a blade between them. The alignment is absurdly accurate. Cardinal directions match to a level we didn't replicate for thousands of years. And the Great Pyramid wasn't just big, it was exact. What makes it uncomfortable is that this wasn't built at the peak of a long technological arc. It appears early, fully formed, and then we never quite do it the same way again. No detailed blueprints, no step-by-step records, just monuments that say we did this and refuse to explain how. That doesn't mean aliens, it doesn't mean magic. It means we're probably underestimating ancient people and overestimating how much knowledge survives time. If you could know the truth, it wouldn't rewrite history. It would remind us that human capability doesn't move in a straight line, and that some of our oldest achievements may still be ahead of our explanations. Story 17. Where is Genghis Khan's tomb? Because the man who reshaped half the known world vanished on purpose. When he died, his burial was meant to leave no trace. Legends say the procession killed anyone who saw it. Rivers were diverted, horses trampled the ground flat. The location was erased by design, not accident. An empire that could conquer continents decided the greatest ruler it ever had should disappear completely. And it worked. We know roughly where to look. Somewhere in Mongolia, likely near the sacred mountain Burkhan Khaldun, but no tomb, no confirmed artifacts, no site we can point to and say, this is it. Satellites scan, archaeologists search, the ground keeps it secret. What makes this unsettling isn't the mystery itself, it's the discipline. The idea that a civilization was capable of creating absolute secrecy and maintaining it for over 800 years. If the tomb were found, it wouldn't just be a historical discovery. it would break a promise that was intentionally kept across generations. Maybe that's why it still hasn't been found. Not because we can't locate it, but because it was never meant to be. Story 18, Oak Island. Because it's not just a hole in the ground, it's a problem that refuses to behave. For over 200 years, people have been digging on Oak Island, convinced something was deliberately hidden there. Not lost, not buried casually, engineered to stay buried. Flood tunnels that trigger when you dig too deep, shafts that collapse on schedule, layers that feel planned, not accidental. That's the unsettling part. Natural sinkholes don't booby-trap themselves. Random treasure caches don't come with flood systems and precise depth markers. Someone put in effort, serious effort. The kind you only commit to if what you're hiding matters, or if you never want it found. And yet, there's no clean answer. Every discovery hints at intention but refuses to resolve. Wood where it shouldn't be. Tools from different eras, artifacts that suggest multiple visits over centuries by people who all decided to leave no clear record. Templars, pirates, privateers, early engineers. Every theory almost works and then breaks. What keeps Oak Island alive isn't greed, it's persistence. Generations of people convinced the island is reacting to them, like it knows it's being watched. If you could know the truth, it wouldn't just answer what is buried there. It would answer why someone went to such lengths to make sure it stayed buried, and why after centuries of effort, the island still hasn't given it up. Story 19, the location of the Garden of Eden. Because it's described like a real place, rivers with names, geography you can point to, not heaven, not another realm, Earth. And that makes it uncomfortable. The text places it where 4 rivers meet, 2 of them clearly identified as the Tigris River and Euphrates River. That pulls Eden out of myth and drops it somewhere in the real world, usually around ancient Mesopotamia. But the geography doesn't line up cleanly anymore. Rivers shift, coastlines flood, ice ages end, entire landscapes vanish under sediment and sea. If Eden existed before recorded history, it could be buried, drowned, or erased beyond recognition. That's the unsettling part. If Eden was symbolic, then it's one of the most powerful metaphors ever written. But if it was literal, even loosely, then humanity's origin story began at a specific place we no longer recognize. A location lost not because it was imaginary, but because time is better at erasing things than we are at remembering them. Finding Eden wouldn't prove religion right or wrong. It would force us to confront the idea that the line between myth and history may be thinner and more fragile than we're comfortable admitting. Story 20. Wow. Signal. Because for 72 seconds the universe spoke, and then never did it again. In 1977, a radio telescope picked up a signal so strong, so clean, and so specific that the astronomer monitoring it circled the data and wrote, "Wow," in the margin. It came from the direction of Sagittarius. It matched what scientists expected from a non-natural source, and it never repeated. That's what makes it unsettling. Natural explanations don't fit cleanly. Comets don't behave like that. Noise doesn't stay that narrow. Interference doesn't vanish forever. And if it was human-made, no one ever claimed responsibility. No follow-up. No echo. Just a single, perfect anomaly. One signal. Once, long enough to notice. Too short to answer back. If it was intelligence, then someone sent something, intentionally or not, and we missed our only chance to respond. If it wasn't, then the universe accidentally produced the most convincing fake message imaginable. Either way, the silence afterward is the point. The scariest part isn't that we haven't heard anything since. It's that for a brief moment, it felt like we almost did. And whatever caused it decided not to try again. Story 21, Jack the Ripper. Because this wasn't just a murderer, it was a failure of certainty. In 1888, someone ended at least 5 women in Whitechapel with precision that shocked even hardened police. Throats cut fast, bodies mutilated after death, organs removed with purpose. This wasn't random violence, it was controlled, escalating, and confident. And then there were the letters. Some were hoaxes, some might not have been. But one thing is clear, the killer understood attention. He knew how fear spreads. He took life in a way that turned the entire city into an audience. What makes this unsettling isn't the brutality, it's the disappearance. No arrest, no confirmed suspect, no deathbed confession. Just a list of names that almost fit. Doctors, butchers, aristocrats, nobodies. Each theory works until it doesn't. Evidence contradicts itself. Timelines blur. Witnesses vanish into history. This happened in the birthplace of modern policing. Fingerprints were emerging, records existed, and still nothing stuck. Which means one of 2 things is true. Either the assassins was terrifyingly ordinary and slipped through unnoticed, or the system failed so completely that the truth was buried with the victims. Jack the Ripper didn't just end people. He proved that even in a world obsessed with order, someone can tear through the cracks and vanish forever. And the fact that we still argue about his identity isn't trivia. It's a reminder that certainty is fragile, and sometimes the darkness gets away clean. Story 22. Human consciousness. Because it shouldn't exist, and yet it's the only thing you ever truly experience. Your brain matters. Neurons firing, chemicals moving, electrical signals obey physics. Nothing in that description explains experience. Not the feeling of being you, not thoughts, not memories, not the fact that there's something it's like to exist at all. And that's the gap no one can close. We can map brain regions, predict decisions milliseconds before you're aware of making them, turn consciousness off with anesthesia, and bring it back like flipping a switch. But none of that explains how subjective experience appears in the first place. At what point does processing become awareness? Is consciousness something the brain produces, like heat from friction? Or something it tunes into, like a signal? Is it localized or spread out? Does it shut off at death or just disconnect from the body? Every answer has consequences. If it's purely physical, then free will is questionable and the self is temporary. If it's not, then reality is missing a fundamental ingredient science hasn't named yet. The unsettling part is that this mystery isn't distant or abstract. You're inside it right now. You can doubt anything, history, memory, even reality, but you can't doubt that you're experiencing something. Consciousness is the one mystery that can't be stepped away from, because whatever it is, it's the thing asking the question. Story 23, the Fermi paradox. Because the universe should be crowded, and it isn't. There are hundreds of billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, many with planets older than Earth. Given time alone, intelligent life should have spread, left traces, and made noise. And yet, everywhere we look, we find nothing. No civilizations, no megastructures, no unmistakable signals. That's the paradox. Either we're incredibly rare or something reliably prevents intelligent life from lasting long enough to be noticed. Maybe civilizations destroy themselves. Maybe technology hits a ceiling. Maybe something wipes them out before they spread. Or maybe the universe is full of life that learned staying quiet is the only way to survive. Every explanation is disturbing in a different way. If we're first, the responsibility is enormous. If we're not, then something happened to everyone else. The most unsettling part isn't the question. It's that the longer we listen, the louder the silence becomes. And silence at this scale starts to feel like a warning. Story 24. The origin of life. Abiogenesis. Because at some point, non-living matter crossed a line and nobody knows how. Earth was just chemistry, water, minerals, energy. No thoughts, no hunger, no fear. And then, somehow, molecules started copying themselves. Not intentionally, not intelligently, just enough to persist, enough to compete, enough to care, in the most primitive sense of the word. That jump shouldn't be easy. Cells are absurdly complex, DNA is precise, even the simplest life is a machine with no obvious starting version. Which raises the uncomfortable question, how many impossible steps happened quietly, without witnesses, before anything could even be called alive? We have theories: primordial soup, deep-sea vents, RNA worlds, lab experiments that get close, but never cross the line. We can make building blocks, we can simulate conditions, but we can't recreate the moment where chemistry stopped being passive and started trying to survive. That moment changed everything. Every thought you've ever had traces back to it. Every fear, every story, every question about the universe exists because matter learned how to keep itself going. If we knew how life began, we wouldn't just understand the past. We'd know whether life is inevitable or whether we're the result of an accident so unlikely it may never happen again. Story 25. Time travel. Not whether it's cool, whether it's possible at all. Physics doesn't completely forbid it. Einstein's equations allow solutions where time loops back on itself, closed time-like curves, wormholes, math that says, in theory, the universe could bend hard enough to let cause and effect collide. But reality refuses to cooperate. If time travel were possible even once, the universe should look different. Paradoxes shouldn't just be thought experiments. They should leave scars, inconsistencies, evidence that causality was violated and patched over. Instead, time behaves brutally simple, forward only, no edits, no second drafts, which raises an unsettling question. Is time travel impossible or self-correcting? Maybe timelines don't branch. Maybe paradoxes resolve by force. Maybe any attempt to change the past either fails or creates a future where the attempt was always part of history. A universe that allows loops, but never contradictions. Or maybe time travel is real, and the only rule is that you never notice it. If we knew the truth, it wouldn't just answer a sci-fi question. It would tell us whether the universe is flexible or whether reality enforces causality with absolute unforgiving discipline. Because if time can be bent, then the present isn't as permanent as it feels. And if it can't, then every moment really is a one-way door, and once you pass through it, there is no return. Story 26. The simulation hypothesis. Because it doesn't sound crazy anymore, it sounds inconvenient. The idea is simple. If advanced civilizations can simulate reality, and simulations are cheap compared to base reality, then statistically it's more likely we're inside one than not. Not as a prank, not as a game, just as a consequence of progress. What makes it unsettling isn't sci-fi aesthetics, it's how well reality fits. Discrete units of space and time, hard limits like the speed of light, physics that looks suspiciously optimized, consciousness that feels real but is impossible to locate in the code. And then there's the silence. No creator revealing themselves, no clear purpose. Just a universe that runs whether we understand it or not. If we're not in a simulation, fine. Reality is strange but self-contained. If we are, then everything still matters subjectively. But objectively becomes harder to pin down. Are we being observed? Archived? Ignored? Is there an off switch? Was this run started for science curiosity or something we wouldn't recognize as intention at all? The disturbing part is that proving it might be impossible from the inside, and that means the most important fact about reality, whether it's fundamental or derivative, could be permanently out of reach. Which leaves us with an uncomfortable thought. If this is a simulation, it's been running long enough for us to ask why. Story 27. The Great Attractor. Because something is pulling our galaxy and hundreds of thousands of others through space, and we still don't fully know what it is. The Milky Way isn't just expanding with the universe. It's drifting, being dragged toward a region of space hidden behind the Milky Way's dust in a direction we can barely observe. Galaxies in that region are moving too fast, as if responding to an enormous mass we can't clearly see. That's the problem. The pull is real, the motion is measurable, but the source is obscured, fragmented, and incomplete. We see pieces, massive clusters, dense regions like the Shapley supercluster, but not enough to cleanly explain the force involved. It feels like gravity without a face. And this isn't distant trivia. This motion affects our entire local group. Our long-term cosmic trajectory is being shaped by something we don't fully understand, something massive enough to bend the paths of galaxies across hundreds of millions of light years. Maybe it's just a normal matter, hidden and boring. Maybe it's something more exotic. Or maybe it's proof that even on the largest scales, we don't have the full map. What makes it unsettling isn't that something is pulling us. It's that we're already moving and only vaguely know why. The universe doesn't ask if you're ready to understand it. It just keeps dragging you forward anyway. Story 28. Tabby's star. Because stars aren't supposed to behave like this. Tabby's star dims, dramatically, irregularly, and without a clear pattern. Not the gentle, predictable dips caused by planets passing in front. We're talking massive drops in brightness, sometimes over 20%, with no consistent timing and no obvious explanation. That's the problem. Dust doesn't fit cleanly. Comets don't either. Instrument error was ruled out early. The star has been fading over years, not just days, which makes most natural explanations feel strained and patched together. At one point, scientists had to admit something uncomfortable. If you saw this behavior without context, you'd consider artificial structures, not aliens as a punchline, but megastructures as a last resort hypothesis, a civilization-scale project that partially blocks starlight. That idea was eventually walked back, but it was never fully replaced with something satisfying. What makes Tabby's star unsettling isn't that it might be artificial, it's that it exposed a gap in our confidence. We like to believe stars are solved, understood, reliable. This one isn't. It sits out there flickering in a way that reminds us how quickly we know how this works turns into we don't actually know. If you could know the truth, it wouldn't just explain one strange star. It would tell us whether the universe still has the power to genuinely surprise us, or whether we're already brushing up against things we're not ready to recognize. Story 29. Mary Celeste. Because an entire crew vanished and left everything behind. In 1872, the Mary Celeste was found drifting in the Atlantic. Seaworthy. Cargo intact, food on the table, personal belongings untouched. No signs of violence, no damage that explained abandonment, just a perfectly functional ship with no people on it. That's the part that refuses to make sense. Experienced sailors don't abandon a ship for no reason, especially not into the open ocean. Not without lifeboats missing, not without a clear emergency. And certainly not all at once. Every explanation almost works. Alcohol fumes, weather panic, mutiny, piracy. Each theory explains one detail and breaks another. None account for the calm, orderly way the ship was left behind. It feels less like disaster and more like interruption, as if something convinced the crew they needed to leave immediately. And that staying was worse than the unknown. Whatever that was, it left no trace, no bodies, no message, no second chance to clarify. The ocean is very good at erasing mistakes, but this wasn't erased violently. It was erased cleanly. If you could know the truth, it wouldn't just solve a maritime puzzle. It would answer a deeper question we don't like asking. What could make rational people abandon safety, certainty, and survival, and step willingly into nothing? Story 30, Dreaming. Because your brain does its strangest work when you're unconscious. Every night, you lose control, and your mind starts generating entire worlds. Faces you've never seen, places that don't exist. Emotions strong enough to linger after you wake up. Fear, love, guilt, nostalgia, all felt as real as anything in waking life. And no one agrees why. Some say dreams are memory cleanup. Others say threat simulation, emotional regulation, random noise your brain stitches into a story because it hates chaos. All of those explain pieces, but none explain experience. None explain why dreams feel meaningful while they're happening, or why some of them repeat, or why the brain would bother simulating reality so vividly when the body is paralyzed and defenseless. Then there's the unsettling part. Dreams don't follow time correctly. Past and future blend, logic dissolves, identity shifts, and yet consciousness persists. You're still there, experiencing something, even though large parts of your brain are offline. Which raises an uncomfortable question. Is dreaming just the brain misfiring, or is it consciousness operating without the constraints of the waking world? If we knew the real reason dreams exist, it wouldn't just explain sleep. It would explain what the mind does when it's finally alone, and whether reality is the default state, or just the one we agree to stay in when we wake.